I was not able to catalog it. I'm sorry to be able to recognize all the dignitaries that are here. I'm not familiar with the. I am familiar with Rabbi Mirachnik and Rabbi Katz, Rabbi Shmurla, still student of the famous writer, and Rabbi Shmurla I met today. But I would like to recognize Rabbi Shulman, an old convert from Israel. I don't know if you remember me. I'm older than you. In fact, there's not many people that I am not older than this. And I like to recognize my son, Chaim Schwartz, a new member of the IGUD. He is the executive vice president of the Spivak here in Vadavan, Queens. Knarsi Year of the Summer of Queens, and the Rabbi of Congregation or Levi in Kew Gardens. So, last week's parsha, we have the story of Makoshesh. And Makoshesh, he did a very, very terrible thing. It says, "V'yetzi ben ish Yisraelis, v'hu ben ish Mitzri, v'sot ben Yisrael, v'notu b'machana, ben Yisraelis, ish Yisraeli." Why did he do such a terrible thing? Why was he Megad? Rashi says, "V'hechem Yatsa." Where did he come from? Three pshatim. Number one, may Olamo Yatsa. He obviously lost his Olam Haba for doing this something. The Rebbe said, "He parsha Shalamala Yatsa Liglei Amar Yom Shabbos Yaksanu Derech Hamelach Lachol Pas Kama V'Kol Yom Shem Pas V'Neder Shal Tisha Yom and Get Me Up." He scoffed at the parsha of the Lechem Aparna. Now, we have to ask a question: what exactly was bothering him about the Lechem Aparna? First of all, as we see today, when there's really no reality, we know that Siluko Karichaso, when they took the Lechem Aparna out, it was just as warm and moist as when they put it in. So therefore, what was the basis of his whole timing? He was saying, in other words, he said, if a temple king eats fresh bread, so how can the emissaries, how can the Kahanim of the Shluchei D'Rachmana of Rabbi Shalom, what they should eat daily bread? What is this? Enterments? They go to the outlet and get bread. So it wasn't even true what he was saying. But like everything else today, also it's not true. It's not true what people say. So I thought shot from Ramat's rooms in front of Rafa that said that he understood that he was a very, very unique person. Why was he unique? He was the only, you might say, illegitimate offspring in all of Klal Yisrael in all the years that they were in Galus Mitzrayim. Scoffers said, if they had complete dominion over the Jews, over their bodies, that they could tell them what to do day and night and urge them on to work and to labor, is it possible that they didn't exercise chas v'shalom, impure dominion over their women as well? But we know that it's not so, because in Bamidbar we have every single Seder, every single mishpacha that was nicknamed by the Divine Shalom Hachanaiki, a Hey at the beginning, a Yud at the end, except for Mishpachas HaYimna, which in itself is a Yud and a Hey at the end. This was a testament to the purity of Klal Yisrael. This gentleman, who was never identified by name, he knew that he was the only offspring of an illicit relationship in all the years in Mitzrayim. What was his response to that? His response to that was to become basically a proponent of the non-Jewish lives matter movement. GL matter, MLM, Egyptian lives matter. The only way that he could reconcile his inferior status was by denigrating the status of Jews. In other words, what he was denying was that Klal Yisrael is an Amsagum. There's nothing special about you people. We're all people. None of us are different than the other. In a way, he was the precursor of Korach. Korach had the same line. as we see from today's news today, it's a very, very seductive argument. It's a very, very seductive argument. And the twin brother of that argument is, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's history, it's slavery, it's supremacy that people are asserting over you. It's not your fault. So instead of taking responsibility, instead of accepting what he was, we all know that we have to go through life with the hand that we're dealt. Some of us are short, some of us are tall, some of us are rich, some of us are not. We have to accept where the Rebbeinu Shalom put us with the knowledge that we were given the proper tools that we need in order to fulfill our trip in this world. The idea that the Jews are not special and that they're just one of a number of nations has been a theme that has been assailed against us for centuries and centuries. My dear brother-in-law, Rabbi Fox from Seattle, wrote this week, Grata, that Rav Soloveitchik, Zichron Livracha, wrote after the establishment of the Medina that one of the boons that obtained was that regardless of what a person's approach toward the Medina is, that our enemies, our Christian enemies, were teaching for centuries the doctrine of supersessionism, which essentially said that the Jews are finished. That we did have a covenant, the covenant was broken, we sinned, we were exiled, we're not coming back. When we came back to the modern state of Israel, among other things, it was a tremendous kasha. It was a tremendous kasha to the Goyim, and that's why it took the Vatican very, very many years till they figured out that maybe they could undermine us by being friendly with us rather than by not recognizing us. But the idea that the Jews are not special and that they do not have a special relationship with their Rebbeinu Shalom has been a constant theme in our history for many, many years. It was to combat this pernicious philosophy that Rabbi Spivak came into this world. It was his conviction, and it was his mission to demonstrate to the world that we are an Am Segula. And he did this as a younger man by opening up a Talmud Torah in Spring Valley for public school children. As I said before, he educated at every level. He started in Seattle as a day school teacher. He got married and moved to Spring Valley and opened up a Talmud Torah. Then, with the advent of media, he was able to be Manasecha Chutza, to spread even more. I encountered him once. I was an attorney. I worked for the Metro North Railroad, and one of my clients in the railroad was the police department. I had experience in this, in police brutality cases, and one day they told me to come down to Grand Central Terminal, that there was sort of a dispute going on there, and should I come down and accompany the police chief, Chief Esposito. Came down, and I saw a table of Jews for Jesus. It was almost their man in a shul, and they were giving out information. And then there was Chazak, Rabbi Spivak, who was counter demonstrating. I said, Jack, what are you doing here? He said, because I knew him. I just want to say, by the way, I knew him for 58 years. We were bucking together in 1963 in Yeshivas Ner Yisrael. I knew him longer than anybody, including his wife, and I'm sure anybody in this room. I said, Jack, what's going on? He said, we heard that they were demonstrating here, and we are kind of demonstrating. So I said, Chief, what's the story? He said, neither of them have a permit. But I'll throw out whoever you said. I told him, kick out the guy. His passion was L'Hasar Torah L'Yoshna, and to spread it out as much as possible. I just wanted to say one anecdote about a disagreement that we had that I think will illustrate to you the nature of the way that a true Talmid Chacham, a true Ben Torah, and a true Tzaddik approaches things. I saw what you wrote on your website about women acting as a sandik, and I spoke to them about it, and we had a long-range discussion. We also had, just like Rabbi Klaus, we had very, very long conversations. We were friends for years. I often appeared on his radio show, and we were discussing this idea of open orthodoxy and the female rabbis that they're counterfeiting in Riverdale, right here in the city of New York. So he said to me, we spoke and said, what would be the response? How would you answer people who ask, why can't women be rabbis? This was a subject that we were discussing, what would be a response for that? So I said to him, I answer very pashut, very academical. If you look at the website of Yeshivat Marat, Balaz, you'll see, Lamashal, to take a fictitious but average student, let's call her Becky Solomon, right? Becky Solomon is now enrolled in the PhD program in French literature at Tufts University and pursued her smicha, her ordination at Yeshivat Marat. I said, Jack, how can a person who lives out of town be engaged in a PhD program and seriously be in a smicha program? Naturally, he understood smicha programs because of the kollel. I was the attorney for the kollel when it was formed, and I knew of his dedication to a top quality program that would produce Talmidei Chachamim who are Azkarim. So I said that's what I would say. It's physically impossible, and it's the same with the male counterpart with Rabbi Greenberg's phony yeshiva also. The point is that they're really graduate students someplace else. They study Talmud for a week, so essentially they're Amaratzim, so therefore they have no credibility. This refutes them without getting to the real issue, delivering rabbis and all that. He did not agree with me. He said no. He said, Marvin, no. So I bitched, it had nothing to. Yeah, they could be sitting and learning for 30 hours a day. Yeah, they could be writing Sforim. They could be learning Rukayim. Unzera B'Soira is not to have women violating tznius to become a rabbanim, and that's it. That's it. It's like he said to me, like, what are you talking about? You make pedantic arguments. How many hours a week? He said to me, you're bothered. He said to me, you're bothered because of all the hours that you spent in the yeshiva, chazering Yerodea, and learning every prima gada, but you know that Lefsky is going to test you on it, and therefore you say, like you're very upset. They have a right to call themselves a rabbi after work so hard? He said, that is correct. He said, well, that's not correct. And of course he was right. Of course he was right. My friendship with him started when he came back as a superstar to the yeshiva. Why was he a superstar? Because he left home in Atlanta, Georgia. His father was a Talmud of Torah Ladas who somehow wound up living in Atlanta, and sent him to TA in Baltimore, I think 6th grade, as a young boy. And after he graduated high school from TA, he came back to Atlanta to go to college. But after 1 year, he realized there was not a place where he belonged, and he came back to Baltimore, this time to Yeshivat Ner Yisrael. So in 1963, a person who would be in college and give it up and come back to yeshiva was considered to be something of a shame dover. And in his entire life, he was a shame dover. He was a shame dover for causes. He was a shame dover against Shmad. He was a shame dover in favor of Jewish education, and he was a shame dover in Askonas in creating a program for Rabbanim who could continue to have that strong Klal Yisrael. I cried bitterly from his patira, and I miss him very, very greatly. I miss our conversations. I miss our arguments. Yes, I do. Some of them were very, very spirited. And over the years, I was likely to be his Talmud, his chaver, his lawyer, and ultimately his Talmud again. He's Ifrit Baruch.